Okay. Let me set the scene for you. It was winter of 2016, and at the time I was living in New York in a dingy little basement apartment with my best friend in South Brooklyn. It was cold. It was cripplingly cold. The streets were laden with snow, and the snow was probably all the way up to my hips. My wardrobe consisted of a pair of thermals for every pair of jeans, and my leg hairs were long enough to braid. The thing about winters in the United States is they're a special kind of breed, you know, and as a now Bombay gal, I genuinely don't know how I survived all of those winters. Because the thing about the cold is it puts everyone into this emotional haze. You know, you get to see the people you love less frequently, the sun sets unabashedly early, you feel the warmth of your own body and you appreciate that, but it also makes you yearn for the warmth of another. Winters have this ability to bring about a stark reality to your own sense of loneliness and sadness in a way that the warm weather tends to blanket. Winters also invite a lot of unexpected expenses on therapy. Now, I have had a long and convoluted journey with my mental health, as I'm sure many of you people watching can probably relate to. I've struggled with anxiety and depression in varying waves of various doses over the course of my life. And my path of growth has been self-awareness carved out in patches, very much lampposted by these winters in the United States that I'm telling you about. I've been going to therapy for a really long time, and I think therapy is a beautiful practice that should be normalized and everyone should be encouraged to go to it. But I think one thing people leave out when talking about therapy is that it's not going to work unless you do it right, in the sense that therapy is not going to work if you're not honest about what you're going through. And here's where I am either the best or the worst candidate for therapy, because as a natural-born storyteller and as a people pleaser, I will do anything to make someone laugh, even if that person is someone I am paying to listen to me. So that's the issue with therapy, is that most of my therapy sessions are just me paying someone for an hour to do a comedy routine for them. I'm pretty sure there was one therapist who just kept calling me back week and week again, not because I actually needed to see her, but because I was just that entertaining and she found me funny. And the thing with comedy, the thing with packaging your stories in a way that are entertaining, that are meant to please the person in front of you, is that you cut them short. You tend to leave out the bits that are emotional, vulnerable, weak. You tend to leave out the bits that aren't an interesting part of the story. I think I came to a lot of these realizations earlier this year when I watched the Netflix special Nanette by Hannah Gatsby. And what she says there is essentially that she dissects comedy, and she talks about how in comedy we use punchlines. And punchlines tend to cut the story short because there is so much more that happens after the punchline. And when we package our stories in these very particular ways in order to entertain and in order to make people laugh, we miss out on so much that has actually happened to us. And we don't allow ourselves to process that. And we don't allow the people we're telling to recognize that that is something we've gone through. So let me give you a little bit more perspective to kind of talk about this in further detail. It was the winter of 2016, like I mentioned, and I was seeing my therapist. Her name was Michelle, a lovely lady, and we were sitting and we were talking about love, conversations that, you know, normally take place in rooms like that and outside rooms like that. I was telling her a little bit about how my roommate and I had gone on a social media online dating binge. Now, my roommate had especially taken to this app called Hater, which is essentially this app that tabulates all of the things you hate, ranging from donut holes to Reddit trolls, and it matches you to someone according to how many things you hate. Now, my roommate, as someone who hated a lot of things, found great success using this app, and I always found there was something really lovely about the concept of hate breeding ground for love. Now, I wasn't so adventurous. I stuck to the basics, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, you know, the usual. And for anyone who's attempted online dating, I'm sure you know that it is a long, tedious process that requires a lot of patience, and most of the time is literally just spent swiping, probably on the toilet. Pretty sure that's when most people do it, but just, you know, doing the motions of it. I think, you know, you fluctuate between Temple Run and Tinder. There's kind of the same motions, you know, left, right, up, down, just and you know, you need a lot to get through that process. But there was one day, one fine winter day when I struck gold. I came across this profile of this guy named Akash. Akash, that's with 2 A's, so it's Akash. It's an Akash with confidence. And his bio read one simple and subtle line: the unbearable lightness of being. Poignant, poetic, profound, and also the title of my favorite book ever written by Milan Kundera. It's the book that changed my life. And I remember thinking to myself, if this isn't love, If this right here isn't love, the fact that his bio was the name of my favorite book, then I genuinely don't know what love is. This is what love is. So obviously I swiped yes. And then I, sat there patiently waiting. Minutes passed, and he did eventually swipe yes. And we matched, and I screamed. And the second we matched, I messaged him being like, oh my God, that is my favorite book. To which he responded, hey, sup? Yeah, great book. Yeah, but despite our mismatched enthusiasm at the beginning of this interaction, we eventually moved on to have a very fruitful conversation. He asked me about where I was from, where I was working, and at the time I had a really interesting job. I was working as a documentary screener for a television show on PBS, which essentially meant that I got to watch movies all day and get paid for them. Pretty sweet deal. I was telling him a little bit about my favorite film, which is called Going Clear. It's an investigative journey into the Church of Scientology. Turns out that is his favorite film too. So, we have the same favorite book, we have the same favorite film. I'm pretty sure we're soulmates at this point, so it's going really well. And at that point, I'm waiting for the question of, are we gonna meet? Because there's a crossroads at this point in a conversation where either you live on as this couple that has spoken for endless hours online, and then you spend the following few years liking each other's Instagrams, but you never actually meet. Or you go on a date, you test it out, you see if something has happened. And I was gearing towards the latter. So eventually, I mustered up the courage, and I said, hey, how about we grab some dinner next Tuesday? And I checked my calendar and realized that next Tuesday was Valentine's Day, to which I violently recorrected myself and was, no, next Wednesday, not trying to go on a first date with you on Valentine's Day, even though we are in love already. Anyways, he responded to that. He said, yes, absolutely, let's meet, but let's not grab dinner. How about we go to the Church of Scientology? Now, when he suggested this, there were two options that came to mind. One, he has been planted by the Church of Scientology on Tinder. He knew the information that this was my favorite book. This was all orchestrated, and he was going to take me there, have me join the cult, and then kill me. That was option one. Option two was he's my soulmate, and he knows exactly how to take a girl like me out, and we're going to fall in love. So I decided to go with the latter. So we did. We met that next Wednesday. We decided to meet at an Irish pub in Times Square around the corner from the Church of Scientology. I wore my dungarees, I washed my hair, I made an effort. I sat there waiting, craning my neck every time the door opened, hoping it would be him. He did show up 15 minutes late, and when he walked through that door, I melted. I absolutely just unraveled and came apart to another level because he was so cute. He was even cuter in person. He had this brilliant white smile, and he was just walked through that door with such a sense of confidence, and the second he sat down, it just flowed. It flowed so beautifully. We skipped all the small talk. We went straight into talking about what we were going to do at the church, how we were going to go about this evening. He suggested that we come up with fake identities. So I was Priyanka, he was Raj. I was a gynecologist, he was an oncologist. We were newlyweds from New Jersey, and we were visiting the big city for the week just to do some sightseeing. Now, I don't think you realize how great of an activity this was, because normally on the first date, I'm doing all this in my head, planning the marriage, the kids, the job, all of that. Here, we actually got to do it together on paper and then got to enact it for the hours that followed. Pretty sweet deal, to be honest. So anyways, we have our identities in hand. We're about to make our way to the church. And he pulls out his phone and he opens up this app called ENSE, E-N-S-E. Looked like a pretty simple app. It had this baby pink typography and a really simple layout. And I asked him, I said, what are you doing? What is that? He went on to explain that ENSE was this company, this startup that he was working for. His boss was a musician, and his boss used to do a lot of spontaneous riffs and come up with a lot of things on the spot that he was really proud of, but would soon forget right after. And no one recorded it, and it wasn't saved, so he would miss out on a lot of these, these pieces of music that he would create on the spot. So he invented this app, ENSE, which is essentially an app that is listening at all times. It is listening to everything that is being the sounds around you. So say you're a musician and you do a lot of riffs on the spot. Say you're a writer and you say something really profound and you want to hold on to that. Say you're a journalist and you run into Donald Trump and he says something really dumb and you want to have that content. What ENSE does is, as soon as the interaction is over, when you press the button, it'll have the last 15 minutes of what it had heard recorded and downloaded as a file on your phone. Sounds pretty shady, doesn't it? But for some reason, the way he sold it to me, the way I heard it, it sounded kind of cool. And he suggested that we go to the Church of Scientology and we use this. We interview different people, we talk to them, we try to get information out of them, and then when something really good comes up, we use this app, we press the button, and we have it saved, and we could turn it into a cool podcast or whatever in the future. Now, I thought that was pretty cool. I said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Adds another layer to this amazing evening. So we do that, ends in hand, fake identities, holding hands, walking down, pretending to be this married couple in love, and we make our way through, and as we're nearing outside the church, there's a man standing outside passing out flyers to everyone. He catches our eye and he sees something in us, so he comes up to us and says, hey, please, you don't seem like you're from here. Can we talk a little bit? You must be so cold. Please, come inside. I'll give you some tea. Let me just tell you a little bit about what we do. And so we willfully obliged, and we followed him into the church. He pulled us through, we walked through this hallway, which was very brightly lit with these white lights, and it had lines of huge painted portraits of famous Scientologists throughout history. As we meander through the hall, we make our way towards the back of the church to where there is a private theater. He leads us into the theater and shuts the door really firmly behind us. And we sit down, and the introductory video to the Church of Scientology begins to play. Now, let me describe what this video was like. Imagine a really terrible 90s American infomercial aesthetic, you know, just really bad cinematography and propaganda statements being shoved at us. So it was like, Chapter 1, the aliens in your brain. Chapter 2, how to get rid of the aliens in your brain. Chapter 3, are you living life to your fullest potential? Chapter 4, you are not living life to your fullest potential. Chapter 5, Chapter 6, Chapter 7, so on and so forth. And we're sitting there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour and a half. And after an hour and a half has passed, we hear a knock at the door, and an elderly woman peeps her head in and says, oh, dears, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to kick you out early. There's a huge tour group behind me, and they need to see the video. And we quickly scuttle our way because we do not want to sit through any more of that. But as I'm walking past her, I say, but, I mean, we've been sitting here for an hour and a half. How much longer was left? She said, oh, dear, no. This is a 4.5-hour long video. We cut you very short. But if you want, there's a DVD you can buy outside for $49.99. Anyways, ran out of there as fast as we could. So glad we didn't have to sit there for that much longer. Made our way to the reception, where we ran into this very dapperly dressed, confidently spoken young man. And he started telling us a little bit about his journey with Scientology, how when he moved to the United States, he struggled a lot with alcoholism, with unemployment. He was living on the brink of poverty, and he found the church, or rather the church found him, and all of a sudden he realized that there were pockets of his life that he wasn't living up to its fullest potential. The church helped him find a job. He started earning money. He started living life fuller and to a greater degree than he was before. And as he was narrating this, towards the end of this conversation, he looked me deep in the eye. I locked my gaze, and he said, what about you? Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel like you're living life to its fullest potential? Are you happy? Do you feel all of these things? And I just looked at him like, because obviously not, but I wasn't going to tell him that. But the thing is, he caught on to my hesitation like that, and he said, oh dear. Here's what I suggest. I think you should take our personality test. It tends to speak to people on the brink and show them the light. Now, here's the thing about the personality test. If you've seen this documentary, Going Clear, one of the main things they warn you against is this personality test. Because even the strongest of minds, in the act of taking this test, will break down and will eventually join the church. Because it is so manipulative. It picks out on all of the insecurities that we as human beings have. And it will break you down to the point where you feel like you need the church in order to save yourself from these aliens that are in your mind. And I was alone at this point when he was talking to me, because Akash had gone to the corner to, press the button and download everything that he had just said. So I panicked and I jerked away from him as fast as I could. I grabbed Akash by the arm and I said, oh, we have to go. I waved to the dapper young man and I said, oh, bye, thank you so much for the hospitality. We gotta go. Okay, get out. Took Akash. We fell out of the church and we held each other laughing, giggling, talking about how, holy shit, that was insane. I cannot believe that just happened. Can you believe he just said all of these things? Whew. And, we just reveled in this moment of what we had achieved, of what we had just witnessed. We ran to the nearest falafel store and we stuffed our faces with food and we listened to the recordings and we just sat with what we had experienced. Now, so far this story seems pretty great, right? This seems like a pretty good first date. I mean, we'd gone through this experience together. We were pretending to be this married couple. We already began on the foot of being soulmates, so it was going pretty well. So I'm sure you're wondering how this ties into the whole winter therapy, sad loneliness scenario I painted at the beginning. Well, the thing about these things is if something seems too good to be true, most of the time it actually is too good to be true. So here's how the story continues. After the date was over, he dropped me home. We got to my door. We hugged goodbye. I said I had a really great time and we should do this again soon. Not this particularly, but something along the lines of this. And he said the same, and I made my way. We parted ways, and I walked away with that absolute weightlessness of a perfect night spent with a new, perfectly found stranger. As I walked into my apartment, I turned my keys through the door, and my roommate and one of our closest friends from school were sitting on the couch. And of course, immediately as they saw my face, they were like, "Tell us everything." So I did tell them everything. In every minute, minuscule, dirty, embarrassing, revealing detail, I chalked out each and every moment of that date that had just taken place. Like in very close detail, and also with side commentary, such as, "Hey, remember how we stalked him the night before the date and he had that video from 2012 that he put up on Facebook where he had that Australian accent? Yeah, he so doesn't have that Australian accent anymore." And other such details from the date that I would sooner die than have this newfound soulmate ever hear or find out I had said. Now, after I had spewed out all of this very personal, revealing information, my roommate said, "Oh, but what about that app? I mean, that app was so shady. Like, what's up with that?" So I said, "Oh, yeah, I mean, let me show you." And turns out the app had been open on my phone this whole time. So I said, "Oh, there we go. Let me just demonstrate how it works." So I pressed the button. And the audio file of the last 15 minutes, essentially everything I had just said to them in embarrassing detail, downloaded onto my phone. Now, what I didn't know, what I was not informed of, is that not only did the audio file download onto my phone, but it also uploaded onto NSYS public social media platform for the world to see. Not only the world, but it uploaded all of that very personal information on a space that my future husband, boyfriend, lover would go to the next morning at 8 a.m. and listen to as part of his job. So when this happened, I went into an absolute frenzy. I was running around with my hands like this. I deleted the app. I tried to delete the recording. My roommate downloaded the app, tried to delete, record. It was a lost cause. It was 20 minutes of absolute panic with no solution. It was dead. It was done. It was dusted. It was revealed. It was out there on the internet for everyone to see, and that's it. It was just there. Nothing could be done about it. I went to bed that night feeling so empty and defeated because there I was. I had this perfect evening with this amazing guy, and I was on the brink of this amazing new chapter of my life. And with one dumb press of a button, all of that just went away immediately. Now, I woke up the next morning, and in an attempt to salvage whatever was left, I texted him being like, "Hey, I had a really great time last night. We should do it again." To which I never got a response. Done. End. Punchline. End of story. Finished. Finito. The end. Now, normally when I tell this story, it's met with some kind of reaction. You know, people say, "Wow, what a crazy story. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you. You should really put that in a storytelling thing someday and perform it for G5A," as they say. But she just looked at me blankly the entire time. She didn't laugh. She didn't react. She didn't say anything. And then, as I finished, there was just this empty space. And she said, "So, how do you feel about all of that?" Now, you see, that's not a question I answer. You don't include that part in the story. You don't talk about how you felt. You don't talk about the pain. You don't talk about the vulnerability of being rejected. You don't talk about how the fact of the matter is, if this guy actually liked me, I'm sure hearing that recording wouldn't have derailed him. He would have found it funny. The fact of the matter is I went on this date with someone I thought was so perfect, with someone I could envision being with, and he didn't like me. He rejected me, and it didn't work out. The fact of the matter is that I was in pain and I was hurt, and this event in my life, funny as it was, triggered a whole other feeling of loneliness, a feeling like I could never be loved, a feeling of rejection. But these bits don't belong in the story. People don't want to hear this part of the story. People just want to hear about the Scientologist that I almost, married. And that's the thing, is that when we tell stories in a certain way, when we package them in a certain way, that are made to be digestible and funny and normalized in a way that's meant to please other people and entertain other people, we miss out on so much. We miss out on talking about that pain, that vulnerability, that everything that we went through that is so important at the core of that story, that will inform how we rationalize things in the future, that will inform how our experiences can speak to the person we become. It can inform that process of self-growth. And when we end it at the punchline, we take away so much from these stories. And that's what this story, and that's the question that I'm posing, is what is it that we lose? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't find comedy in things that we go through. We absolutely should. It is so important to be able to see the silver linings in things. It's so important to be able to laugh at what's happened to us. It's so important to take our experiences and not let them weigh us down. But at the same time, what I'm trying to say is if there is pain, we should let ourselves feel it. We cannot stop that pain from entering the stories if it is actually there. Because after all, the pendulum of emotion will only swing so high in one direction as it is allowed in the other. And that's the thing. That's what we lose when we cut stories short. We need to be able to include each of these bits in the stories that we tell of our lives, not just for ourselves, but from the people who are listening to us. And that's what the Church of Scientology taught me.